This video marks the beginning of the most important series I will ever create for this channel, a culmination of 6 or 7 months of contemplation, the very heart of my worldview. These videos are not just a project, but a descent into the deepest parts of my soul. I have gone all the way down, into the abyss where no light reaches, among the eternal creatures of darkness. And this is the wisdom I have brought back from the deep. At the core of it all stands a single question: who is God? Everything rests upon this question: the world, reality itself, and our very sense of being. Within this question, all other questions find their place, and from it, I will attempt to answer the greatest ones that have occupied my thoughts. At least, I will try. Some might wonder, what have I read? What knowledge have I discovered? But I would say that all the books in the world are meaningless in comparison to what has always been with me. We spend our lives searching for knowledge across the earth, only to realize, at last, that all answers, eternity itself, have been within us all along, buried deep in the dark, within the depths of every soul. At first, I had no intention of creating a video. I was simply writing down thoughts, believing them to be important realizations, too valuable to be lost. But as time passed, the thoughts kept flowing, and I kept writing more and more, until one day I decided to make a video about my understanding of Christianity. I wrote a script, but the ideas kept expanding, branching out into all topics connected to religion and philosophy. It all began with a question about God. I tried to reach him in the infinite depths of the soul, but such a search is an endless journey through darkness. Why darkness? Because we are blind. If God is light, then those who seek him are condemned to wander in eternal night, like exiles in a cave, forever battling the creatures of ignorance. This series is my battle, a struggle for survival against ignorance itself. I had originally planned to make a single, long video, but as I kept adding to it, the project grew beyond anything I expected. It became the length of an entire book, over 12 hours of material. So I made the decision to divide it into a series of 10 to 15 videos, perhaps more, as new ideas continue to emerge. In the introduction, I want to make something clear. These videos will be my personal view of Christianity. I encourage you to approach them critically, but also with the willingness to understand. No one can fully know God. We can only believe, and this is not an attempt to provide a definitive explanation of God. Instead, it is a search, a never-ending path towards the light. Every human concept, no matter how profound, inevitably reduces God's infinite presence to something finite. In Christianity, particularly in the teachings of Jesus, love is the most important concept. That is what I want to focus on in these videos. But I will also address the question that challenges many believers: how can a loving God allow death, suffering, and evil? In some of the videos, I will also present a metaphysical stance, closer to science and nature of reality, and how Christianity fits in that worldview. As it is my personal view of Christianity, I will tell some stories from my personal life that align with my interpretations, so you can get a picture of my connection to religion and how it shaped my view of God and reality. We will explore the nature of good and evil, how God and the devil impact our lives, the connection between religion and political structures. We will also explore topics such as sin and forgiveness, angels and demons, heaven and hell, and many other topics I decided to merge into this series of videos. I felt a strong need to cover these topics, to cover my entire investigation and my philosophical views, as I believe these are the themes that represent the Western culture as a whole. We can explore countless traditions and systems of knowledge, but what I present here is not merely something I have studied. It is something I have lived since the day I was born. You can expect a lot of uploads in the next few weeks, because most of the work is already done, not just on this topic, but other stuff also. There was that period that lasted for a few months, where I wasn't uploading videos on my channel, but I was working on them all the time, so now I have a lot of material that's almost done, and I wish to publish all of it. Also, a quick shout-out to Robert, who is my first Patreon member. You've been supporting the channel for a while now, and I really want to thank you for that. I truly appreciate it. When it comes to this specific video, it is just an introduction into the series. I find it necessary to explain my motivation for this project, and also a philosophical influence, because this is not a standard, superficial belief in God. I want to present a real-life scenario, God that does not just fill in the gaps, but is necessary for the existence of reality itself. This will be my vision of Christianity, seen through the lens of philosophy. To me, these are one and the same, and to separate them is a mistake. Christianity and ancient Greek philosophy form the bedrock of Western civilization. Yet somewhere along the way, something went wrong. Over time, Christianity has been separated from its philosophical roots. New doctrines and concepts were invented, new traditions emerged, and Christianity itself fractured into countless factions. At one point, all Western knowledge converged in Christianity, but we failed to recognize it as such. Human nature drove us to impose our own interpretations, to reshape the tradition according to our desires, each believing ourselves to be wiser than the rest. And in doing so, we fragmented it, burying its true essence beneath unnecessary additions. This is why Christianity has lost the respect it once held, because it is no longer what it used to be. It was once the pinnacle of Western civilization, but now only scattered fragments remain, buried beneath centuries of accumulated distortions. Yet the core is still there. We just need to uncover it from beneath the rubble, to retrieve the teachings that go to the heart of reality and how to live in accordance with it. In my opinion, our civilization took a wrong turn, lost something vital, and in this series, I will attempt to point out what I believe is the right way forward. At times, I wrote in my native language, because as I already mentioned, most of this text, or in other words, scripts for the upcoming videos, were not intended for videos, just thoughts I was writing down. Later, when I decided to create videos from these writings, I translated these sections with the help of artificial intelligence. Yes, English is not my native language, but English is spoken worldwide, and this is why I chose to create my channel in this language. I understand English perfectly, but I think you would agree with me when I say that thinking and writing in one's native language is simply more natural. I felt these ideas were important, so I made the effort to translate them and share them in a way that people from all around the world could understand. These past few years, I found myself in an unusual place, spending most of my time reading, listening to books, and immersing myself in deep contemplation. I reached many new conclusions in this period. I was almost entirely alone, without much contact with people or the outside world, completely embedded in philosophy. I realized that the world and other people are distractions. When we interact with others, our thoughts become entangled with theirs, and our focus shifts outward. We become so preoccupied with understanding the world and those around us that we forget to understand ourselves. I've never been a particularly social person. I don't like crowds. They only prevent me from truly thinking about what matters. I need silence. Without it, I feel as if I am not alive. The noise of the world drowns out my thoughts and replaces them with illusions. Without silence, I find myself trapped in a false reality, a world built on deception, selfishness, and pretense. The crowds deceive us, pulling us into distractions and meaningless noise, where we lose ourselves in superficiality. This is why social media, though meant to connect us, only deepens our sense of disconnection and despair. It leads us into nothingness, diverting our attention away from what is truly important. Humans are thinking beings, and I believe we need solitude to truly hear our thoughts and recognize what matters. I abandoned all my social media when I realized I was immersing myself in artificial portrayals of others, false images, meaningless distractions, and empty illusions that have nothing to do with real life. This is why we forget about God. We forget about life itself. We disconnect from the source of our being and lose ourselves in an artificial world. Social media does not reflect who we are. It is an illusion. In this artificial world, we deceive one another with lifeless profiles, feeding our pride and selfishness in exchange for false admiration. But this admiration is hollow. The self we construct on social media is not real. You are not there. It is a dead, empty reflection, detached from the truth of your being. All of it is meaningless. How can we draw closer to God when we are running away from ourselves? How can we embrace truth when we willingly escape into falsehood? God appears only in the light of truth. It is through truth that we recognize our true worth, because existence itself is value. To exist is to live in truth. Yet we seek to escape it, deceiving ourselves with illusions that distort our vision. This is the root of our suffering, our self-imposed blindness, our choice to gouge out our own eyes and replace light with darkness. Society is an illusion, and as time passes, we only construct new illusions on top of the old ones, burying reality beneath layers of deception. We can no longer see clearly. Everything is blurred, faces obscured, truth hidden beneath artificial inventions. And so we are lost, not only in illusion but in ignorance. This is the core of my message in this video. We cannot escape our ignorance. No amount of knowledge about the world will free us from it. In fact, the more knowledge we acquire, the more ignorant we become, because we use that knowledge to construct false realities, shielding ourselves from the truth of who we really are. Knowledge alone will never lead us to the good life. Only wisdom can. Wisdom is what allows us to live well, and for this reason, wisdom is the highest good. All knowledge of this world is nothing but ignorance without wisdom. Love, by its nature, strives for what is beautiful and good. And since wisdom is the only true path to goodness, love itself is a striving for wisdom. But wisdom is not something that can be possessed. It is only something to be sought. Only God possesses wisdom in its fullness. We, as humans, can only strive toward it, stumbling in uncertainty, caught in the realm of ignorance. And in this realm, there are only two kinds of people, those who know they are ignorant and those who do not. Socrates' words, "I know that I know nothing," reveal the first step toward wisdom. Only by acknowledging our ignorance can we begin to seek what is truly beautiful and good. But those who believe they already possess knowledge are too full of their own opinions to strive for wisdom. They are trapped in the realm of shadows, content to dwell in illusions, mistaking mere opinions for truth. To live among the shadows is easy. It is the path of comfort, where pride and self-importance replace real understanding. It is easier to believe in nothing but illusions, for they require no effort, only submission. The world today is ruled by opinion, not wisdom. We do not seek truth. We cling to what is most widely accepted. There are countless questions we cannot answer, and yet, rather than admitting our ignorance, we fill the void with speculation and nonsense. Look at how we teach history, science, philosophy. We declare things with certainty when, in truth, we do not know. We present our assumptions as facts, our opinions as knowledge. But opinions can never be knowledge. And for this reason, I will not speak of things I do not know. I will not even speak of God, because I am too ignorant to do so. My only task is to examine my ignorance, nothing more, nothing less. If we truly wish to educate children, we would teach them honesty, and when a question has no answer, the correct response on every test would be, "We do not know." One cannot start asking questions until one admits one's own ignorance. Yet today, questioning itself is discouraged. We are expected to accept whatever is deemed the most probable, though it is only the most probable according to opinion, nothing more. This is not the way forward. If we do not recognize our ignorance, we will remain in darkness forever. It is crucial to understand this. Accept your ignorance, and you will be liberated. Only then will you allow yourself to begin asking real questions. Philosophy is the art of constant questioning. Life itself is a never-ending question, without a final answer. I do not advocate for any particular dogma or rigid set of rules. I am simply investigating reality and life itself. I named my channel The Lover of Wisdom, but when I say that, I don't mean philosopher in the modern sense. Philosophy is the love of wisdom, as you might already know, but in case you don't, philosophy is a concept that emerged in ancient Greece. It is constructed as a combination of two Greek words. One is philia, which is love, and another is sophia, meaning wisdom. Philosophy is a love of wisdom. Among these Greek philosophers, I believe one stands out as the greatest, and he is the one who, in my opinion, and in opinions of many, had the greatest influence on Western philosophy. And that is Plato, the true lover of wisdom. As Alfred North Whitehead once famously said, the entire tradition of Western philosophy is a series of footnotes to Plato. So you might wonder, why do I call myself the lover of wisdom? I do not claim to possess knowledge, nor am I a scholar. I don't know mathematics or physics. I am not a scientist, nor am I formally educated in philosophy. But I am alive, and you do not need an education to be alive. Any living being has the ability to question what it means to exist. All knowledge, all understanding, comes from living. And true knowledge is not a mere collection of facts, it is life itself. For me, philosophy is not just a collection of books or abstract theories, it is a way of living, a way of existing. Schopenhauer once criticized his contemporaries for immersing themselves so deeply in books that they read themselves stupid. That's why I want to distance myself from the word philosopher, because today it no longer means what it did when it first came into existence. When Plato called someone a lover of wisdom, he didn't mean a person with a degree, someone who studied books, memorized facts, or earned a certificate declaring them a philosopher. He meant someone who lived as a lover of wisdom, someone who was naturally inclined toward philosophy, not someone who became a philosopher through education. Wisdom is not something you acquire in school, it is something you embody. Modern philosophers are not lovers of wisdom, they are lovers of facts. I am too ignorant to concern myself with facts. I will leave the pursuit of facts to the so-called philosophers. I do not seek to know, because I have realized that I am too stupid to truly know anything. Maybe others are different. I don't know. But for me, this is the case. However, what I do know is that my soul suffers from this stupidity, and I wish to find a cure. I believe that cure is wisdom, the only medicine for the soul. Many religious people believe it is enough to say, "I believe." But what does that mean? Words without wisdom are empty. This is why wisdom heals the soul, because only the wise can truly be close to God. Jesus is the perfect example. Or are you going to tell me that Jesus was not wise? I don't know about you, but I believe he was the wisest of all. But let us return to the roots of wisdom, roots I personally find in Plato, whose entire philosophical journey was built on a deep and humbling recognition of his own ignorance. This recognition, no doubt, came from his teacher Socrates, whose death left a profound impact on Plato's soul. From that moment on, Plato dedicated his life not to the accumulation of knowledge, but to the pursuit of what is good, what is just, to the pursuit of wisdom. Why wisdom, you might ask? Because goodness and justice are not things that can be captured or contained in formulas or definitions. They are not scientific facts, nor logical conclusions. They are experiences, realities that transcend the category of knowledge itself. To know something, in the ordinary sense, is to pin it down, to define it, to confine it within the boundaries of certainty. But some things, perhaps the most important things in life, refuse to be confined. Can we ever know, with finality, what is good? What is just? What is beautiful? Try to define beauty, and it slips through your fingers. Try to reduce justice to a set of rigid laws, and you will soon see those laws twisted to serve injustice. Try to list the qualities that make a person good, and exceptions will always appear. These are not things we can reduce to systems. And yet, we feel them. We recognize them when we encounter them. We feel beauty, we feel goodness, we feel justice. But we do not know them, not in the way we know facts or figures. They are not things to be grasped, but realities to be lived. This is the heart of Plato's insight. For him, knowledge in the conventional sense is a lower manifestation of something higher, of wisdom. Real knowledge is not about description, but about participation. It is about the soul, because for Plato, everything happens within the soul. The soul is both life and mind, psyche, and within it we encounter the true foundation of all reality. In this view, truth is not something we impose on the world, but something we come into harmony with. It is transcendent. Goodness, beauty, and justice are not visible or measurable in the empirical world, but they are what make the world possible. They are the invisible, divine forms that allow reality to take shape. They are not in the world is in them. This is why Plato did not seek knowledge, but wisdom. Because true knowledge, the kind we seek when we ask about the good, the just, the beautiful, cannot be pinned down. It cannot be known in the usual sense. It is something that must be approached with humility, through contemplation, through moral effort, through love of the truth, and ultimately through living it. In a world obsessed with certainty, Plato teaches us that the greatest truths are not things we own, but realities we serve. He never promoted a rigid doctrine, and even when he proposed ideas, he followed them with questions, revealing the impossibility of being truly certain about anything. Consider his allegory of the cave. When a prisoner escapes the cave and sees the light for the first time, it is painful. His eyes are not accustomed to it. Over time, he adapts and eventually can even look upon the sun. But after seeing the sun, he must return to the cave. Many interpret this as the duty to guide others out of the darkness. But I believe there is another meaning. When we see the sun, we must return to the cave because our place is among the shadows. We are not meant to live our entire lives in the brightness of absolute truth. We are creatures of the cave, bound to the world of shadows. That is our nature. And so we must continue searching, not for certainty, not for facts, but for wisdom. This is why Plato never claimed to have knowledge about anything, and this is why he is my favorite philosopher. He understood that he was too ignorant to truly know anything. This is the meaning behind Socrates' words, "I know that I know nothing." It is only through constant questioning, through perpetual uncertainty, that we can truly live. Pure reason is unattainable for us. Only God is purely reasonable. Only eternity, where there is no change, no decay, no death, exists beyond the shadows. Therefore, concepts like goodness, beauty, and justice are truths that stand for eternity, and no matter how many worlds come into existence, or how many are eventually destroyed, these concepts are always present in each and every one of them. Because these concepts transcend change, time, and space, they always exist as they are, and all becoming and perishing never changes their form. This is the realm of perfection, heaven, God's dwelling, with no evil, no ignorance, no darkness, the place of true knowledge and wisdom. There, in the eternal light of truth, all things are seen as they truly are. But in this life, such clarity is impossible. We never see things as they really are. We live in the cave, among shadows, mistaking them for reality. And so, our existence itself must be one of endless questioning, because questioning is not separate from life, it is life. When Plato founded the Academy, he did not enforce a single doctrine. By that time, he had already developed his philosophical system, yet he welcomed all ideas. He encouraged open discussion, allowing Epicureans, Pythagoreans, hedonists, and cynics to engage in debate. The best example is Aristotle, who disagreed with Plato on many things, yet Plato did not suppress his ideas. Why? Because he knew that rigid doctrine is impossible. We cannot capture life in a system. The only path to truth is through constant questioning, through open discourse. I want to bring Christianity into this search for wisdom, especially through the lens of Plato. You might disagree. You might say that philosophy and religion, especially non-Christian, pagan philosophers, are incompatible. You might still believe that these traditions are in conflict. And maybe you are right. But I am too ignorant to see that. And my ignorance leads me to believe that wisdom is what we need. Perhaps I am too blind to see the contradiction, but I fully accept my ignorance. And so, I invite you to explore it with me. How do we search for truth? Where do we begin? We must begin from the only thing we are truly certain of, and that is our existence. I think, therefore I am. Only certainty is that I exist. About everything else I am in complete ignorance. Existence is the foundation of all knowledge. There is no other path to understanding. Every person has a philosophy. Every decision we make, every action we take, is shaped by an underlying philosophy, whether we are aware of it or not. Even animals have their own philosophies, their ways of seeking food, raising offspring, or defending themselves. And I would go as far as to say that the universe itself has a philosophy. This is why philosophy cannot be something we merely read. It must be embedded in our very being. If to exist is to have a philosophy, then a religion is study of God's philosophy, and this is exactly what we're doing here in this video. In my opinion, Christianity, Neoplatonism, and of course Plato are deeply interconnected, forming a single structure on which all of this rests. When you read these thinkers, it becomes evident that Christianity is not an isolated phenomenon, but rather a synthesis of Greek and Jewish philosophy, with its heart centered on the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. What distinguishes Christianity from its philosophical and religious predecessors is its emphasis on love for God and love for one another, which Jesus taught as the highest commandment. This is what makes Christianity unique, not its separation from past traditions, but its fulfillment of them. The Greek Platonic tradition was transmitted into Christianity primarily through Neoplatonism, which itself was integrated into Jewish theology. It is important to remember that the first Christians were Jews. Jesus was born into a Jewish family. His mother Mary, his earthly father Joseph, and all his early followers were Jewish. Christianity is rooted in the fulfillment of Jewish prophecies, which is why the Old Testament of the Bible is the Jewish scriptures, and the New Testament builds upon them. However, many Jewish authorities at the time rejected Jesus as the Messiah, leading to his crucifixion, a fact openly admitted in historical records. At the same time, Judea was under the rule of the Roman Empire, which was heavily influenced by Greek thought. In many ways, Rome was a continuation of ancient Greece, preserving and expanding its philosophical and cultural legacy. Western civilization itself was founded in the three great cities of the Mediterranean world, Athens, Rome, and Jerusalem. These traditions are not separate but deeply connected, forming a unified intellectual and spiritual heritage. Everything that emerged from the Mediterranean world, whether in philosophy, theology, or culture, was ultimately a revision, blending, or continuation of these core ideas. Jesus was born into this world, not as an outsider to its wisdom, but as the fulfillment of all its knowledge. He is the embodiment of all creation, all truth, and all traditions that led to the foundations of Christianity. Some critics argue that Christianity is simply a fusion of Greek and Jewish thought, as if this were a weakness. But that is precisely the point. This is not a flaw, it is a confirmation. It is proof of Christianity's deep roots and its role as the culmination of human thought and divine revelation. Only those who lack understanding fail to see this. If anyone doubts this connection, they should read Plato, then Neoplatonism, and then the early Christian philosophers. The continuity is undeniable. If, after reading them, someone still cannot see that Christianity is the natural fulfillment of these traditions, I would question their ability to grasp the obvious. Christianity did not emerge in isolation. It arose from the greatest intellectual and spiritual traditions of the ancient world, bringing them to their ultimate realization in the person of Christ. In the ancient traditions, they had many gods, each god representing an aspect of nature: the winds, the sea, the sun. Each city had its own patron deity, each culture had their own gods. This manifests in disagreements, divisions, which god is the more powerful one, whose gods are the right gods. While in Christianity, with its emphasis on unity and love, everything is a manifestation of one single perfect God, who loves everyone equally, and asks nothing of us, but to mirror this love by loving each other. All the gods of Greek mythology find their fulfillment in Christ. Dionysus, the god of wine. Jesus transforms water into wine at Cana, and his blood is symbolized in the wine of the Eucharist. Apollo, the god of light. Jesus is the light of the world, radiating divine brilliance in his transfiguration and ascension. Eros, the god of love. Jesus teaches that love of God and love of neighbor are the greatest commandments. Demeter, the goddess of renewal and harvest. Jesus feeds the 5,000 with just a few loaves and fish, bringing both physical and spiritual renewal to the world. Even the gods of the sea and the storm. Jesus calms the storm when his disciples fear for their lives. Jesus is the embodiment of the divine on earth, the source of all being, in whom all these aspects of God find their unity. This is not to say that Christianity is a mere imitation. Rather, it is the natural progression of religious understanding, the fulfillment of what came before. Many Christians today try to distance themselves from their own roots, rejecting connections to pagan traditions, to Jewish heritage, and even to the philosophical foundations of their own faith. I don't know if this is due to ignorance, selfishness, or outright defiance, but it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what Christianity truly is. Christianity was born from these traditions, and to deny this is to deny reality itself. It is shameful that so many Christians today try to escape from the very intellectual history that made their faith possible. This rejection of Christianity's foundations is one of the reasons why, as society progressed, Christianity became increasingly entangled with irrational beliefs and nonsensical ideas. When people sever Christianity from its philosophical roots, they turn it into something shallow, something that lacks intellectual rigor. I seek to uncover the true Christianity, the Christianity of deep thought, of intellectual and philosophical power. I want to understand what made this tradition so great, so influential, that it spread across the world and remains the most important intellectual tradition in history. The entire Western civilization is nothing more than scattered fragments of Christianity, and even Christianity itself has become a mere shadow of its former greatness. If Christianity is to survive, it must be restored to its true nature. People must see that Christianity is not just a collection of myths and fairy tales, but a sophisticated and profound philosophy. Only when they recognize this can they begin to appreciate the immense intellectual depth of Christian thought. I find Hegel's understanding of history deeply compelling. He was right in saying that there is a spirit, Geist, moving through our culture, pushing it in a particular direction. This spirit isn't just something we passively observe. We are the ones who move it forward. We feel its consequences in our lives because we are part of its unfolding. To be an individual within this cultural spirit is incredibly difficult. The spirit is so powerful, so deeply embedded in the fabric of our society that it's almost impossible to escape its pull. But this is where Hegel's metaphysics of spirit offers something profound. Against the relativism that can arise from a narrow historicism, Hegel gives us a telos, an inner purpose within history itself, by which progress can be measured. This telos is the growing self-awareness of freedom. For Hegel, freedom is not merely a political ideal. It is the very essence of spirit, of human existence. The more a culture becomes aware of this essential freedom, the more advanced it becomes, not just in political terms, but in truth itself. This should not be understood superficially. Hegel did not mean that freedom is allowing ourselves to do whatever we want. We must be able to discern the bare pursuit of being a slave to our passions like, for Hegel, the animal world from the rational world of human beings. The things we want are exactly what keeps us imprisoned. Wishes are not freedom. The kind of freedom Hegel describes is freedom in terms of progression of human consciousness. Recognizing the existence of the free will in the world, and seeking to comprehend freedom actualized in how we relate to each other and construct social and political institutions accordingly. This development of spirit is both historical and philosophical. Thinking itself rests on an instinctive belief in truth, and the history of philosophy is, for Hegel, a progressive unfolding of deeper and more consistent understandings of that truth. Each philosophical system builds upon the last, not just chronologically, but conceptually. In German, there are two words for history and Geschichte. The former refers to the collection and narration of empirical facts, while the latter refers to the inner logic and developmental movement of events, the true philosophical history. Hegel embraces Geschichte in all his historical writings. He sees humans as uniquely historical beings, not only because we live in time, but because we internalize history. What happens in time becomes part of our very identity. History is not external to us. It is what we are. This is why, in Hegel's view, the history of philosophy is not separate from philosophy itself. We cannot think what earlier philosophers thought, because we stand upon the foundation they built. With distance and historical perspective, we can recognize contradictions they could not yet see. For example, the contradiction in claiming universal personhood while excluding certain groups from that status. Hegel famously outlines three great epochs of history. In the Oriental world, only one person, the ruler, was free. In the Greco-Roman world, some people, typically the elite, were free. But in the Germanic world, or what he calls European Christendom, the idea emerges that all persons are free. This is the ultimate telos of history, the realization that freedom belongs to everyone. This does not mean that history has always lived up to this ideal. In his account of the ancient world, Hegel discusses slavery not as something morally defensible, but as a transitional phase, an expression of a world not yet fully ethical. He sees it as a stage where a wrong is still right in the context of that time. But Hegel is absolutely clear. Slavery is incompatible with reason, freedom, and the rational state. The moral demand to reject it is unconditional. Hegel's vision of history is not a celebration of the past, nor a blind faith in progress. It is a call to recognize that we are historical beings, shaped by what came before, yet capable of self-awareness and ethical transformation. The Spirit moves through us, but we are also called to move it, consciously and freely. In the end, the question is not whether we are part of history. We are. The question is whether we are awake to the spirit that moves through it, and whether we are willing to take responsibility for its direction. I stand firmly rooted in both Christianity and Greek philosophy, in fact, in the union of the two. To lose either, in my view, is to lose something essential to our very being. These two traditions are not merely historical artifacts. They are the very soul of Western culture. They are wisdom and spirit, body and soul, heart and mind. If we imagine Western culture as a human being, then philosophy and religion are its heart. Remove even one half of that heart, and the being begins to die. Remove both, and there is no life left. This isn't just metaphor. We've seen what happens when one side is cast away. Take the Middle Ages, for example. When Emperor Justinian shut down Plato's academy, Greek philosophy was effectively erased from the cultural consciousness. The wisdom tradition was lost, and all that remained was religion, no longer balanced by reason, no longer challenged or deepened by philosophical insight. Over time, religion itself began to deform. Without the presence of philosophical inquiry, Christianity lost its depth and began to take on superficial and even violent forms. God was reduced to a caricature, a man in the clouds, watching and judging. Faith became blind obedience, and intelligence became a threat. Those who asked questions, those who thought deeply, were condemned. Christianity, meant to be a path of unity, peace, and love, turned into something oppressive, a tool of control, an engine of fear. Without wisdom, spirit becomes fanaticism, and without spirit, wisdom becomes dry and hollow. Today, we face an even deeper crisis. Both religion and philosophy have been abandoned. At least in the Middle Ages, one half of the heart remained beating. Now, it seems, the entire heart is gone. True philosophy is rare, replaced by academic formalism or relativistic confusion. Religion, too, has been stripped of its vitality, reduced to shallow rituals or irrational dogmas. What passes for spirituality is often little more than vague sentiment or empty spectacle. And yet, if we look back far enough, we find something different. Before Christianity even existed, ancient philosophy in Greece already carried a deeply spiritual character. Philosophers didn't just write ideas, they formed communities. The Pythagoreans, Plato's Academy, Aristotle's Lyceum, these were more than schools, they were ways of life. To be a philosopher was not simply to think, but to live a certain kind of life, one oriented toward virtue, truth, and the good. It was a moral, spiritual, and intellectual journey. Before philosophy, culture was dominated by mythology and ritual. Then came the philosophers, seeking something deeper than myth, seeking wisdom. And the spirit of the culture recognized them, because the spirit itself needs wisdom to flourish. But once again, during the oppressive phases of Christian history, this wisdom was discarded. The spirit of our culture lost its balance, and chaos followed. Desires ruled, reason fell silent, and consequences unfolded. Then, in modernity, we began to pursue wisdom again, but we made the opposite mistake. We abandoned the spiritual side. We believed we had matured, become wise in casting aside religion, and built a new world on reason alone. But without the spiritual dimension, wisdom itself becomes impossible. Reason without spirit is just as hollow as spirit without reason. This is why the Greeks lived philosophy in near-religious communities. They weren't just thinkers, they were lovers of wisdom. Socrates lived it. Plato lived it. Aristotle, Pythagoras, Epicurus, they all lived it. Philosophy was not a text to memorize, it was a life to embody. And the same is true of religion. If you don't live it, it isn't religion. It's just noise. This, in my opinion, should be the next stage in history. Our culture is starving for depth, for meaning. If we want to restore its vitality, we must return to the heart, to the marriage of Christianity and philosophy, spirit and wisdom, faith and reason. One without the other is a half-life. Together, they form the full breadth of what it means to live, not just in the West, but as a human being. Many interpret Christianity as being in conflict with Greek philosophy, believing that it stood against the philosophies of its time and ultimately triumphed while all others were dismissed. In one sense, this is true. Christianity became the dominant tradition, shaping the course of Western thought. But in another sense, it is not true at all, for Christianity itself emerged from these traditions. A striking example of this is found in the life of the Apostle Paul. Paul, one of the most significant figures in the spread of Christianity, second only to Jesus himself, directly engaged with Greek philosophers. Originally a fierce persecutor of Christians, Paul underwent a profound transformation after encountering the resurrected Christ on the road to Damascus. He was chosen to bring the message of salvation to the Gentiles, becoming the foremost missionary of the early church. Paul was no stranger to philosophy. Educated at the school of Gamaliel, one of the most revered rabbinic teachers in history, Paul possessed deep knowledge of Jewish law while also being well versed in classical literature, philosophy, and ethics. Fluent in Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Latin, he was intellectually equipped to engage with the greatest minds of his time. This intellectual prowess is evident in Acts 17 verses 16 to 34, where Paul debates with Epicurean and Stoic philosophers in Athens. Instead of rejecting their ideas outright, he meets them on their own terms, quoting their own philosophers to build a bridge between their thought and the truth of Christ. While human wisdom glimpses fragments of reality, the fullness of truth is found only in him, who reveals the divine mystery and unites all knowledge in God. After leaving Athens, Paul traveled to Corinth, where he made a striking statement about the limits of human wisdom. He declared that the philosophical reasoning of man, compared to the wisdom of God, is foolishness and can never provide the ultimate answers to life's most pressing questions. Only Christ and the message of the cross, transcending human intellect, can redeem humanity and offer the truth for which mankind has always searched. Yet, Paul did not entirely dismiss philosophy. In his letters, he alludes more than 20 times to ideas from Greek thinkers such as Plato, Socrates, Epimenides, Menander, and Seneca. He recognized that philosophy contains shadows of truth, universal insights that connect all humanity. However, he maintained that the fullness of wisdom is found only in Christ, the true image of the invisible God. Yet, I would argue that wisdom itself is necessary to truly understand Christ and live by his words. Without wisdom, even the truth remains incomprehensible, and this is evident in our modern world. Schools teach all kinds of knowledge, but they neglect the very foundation upon which knowledge rests. Philosophy and religion are treated as optional subjects. One must actively choose to study them, while everything else is mandatory. I never formally studied philosophy during my education. As a teenager, I was not even aware of its significance. Only after completing my schooling did I realize its value and begin exploring both philosophy and religion on my own. Yet, these disciplines form the very foundation of all knowledge. How can one build a house without first laying a foundation? Without a solid base, any structure will collapse. Modern education teaches various sciences without questioning the nature of knowledge itself. How do we know that what we call knowledge is true? How do we know that we know anything at all? It is not enough to claim certainty. We must establish a firm foundation first. Only then can we build upon it. Through my own journey, I have realized that much of my education was like a house without a foundation. Eventually, it all came crashing down, and I lost my sense of certainty. Only after my formal education ended did I begin to rebuild, this time with a proper foundation. I take no pleasure in criticizing modern education, but this has been my experience. I was taught information, and I believed that I knew something. But at a certain point, I realized I had been mistaken. I had learned nothing of true substance. True wisdom is not merely about accumulating knowledge, but about understanding the very basis of what it means to know.